Imagine you're a young woman, just 17 years old, standing in a sealed train wagon in Slovakia, March 1942. No windows, 97 other women packed around you, one bucket of water, one bucket for a toilet. You were told you were going to a work camp. You believed it. You never came home. That train was carrying 997 young Slovak Jewish women and teenagers. The very first mass transport of Jews ever sent to Auschwitz. The man who made it happen wasn't a Nazi general. He wasn't a soldier. He was a Catholic priest in a long black robe, the elected president of a nation, and his name was Jozef Tiso. This is the story of how one man used God, politics, and the machinery of the Holocaust to destroy his own people, and how justice finally caught up with him on a gallows in Bratislava. Where you're watching WW2 Time Tales, where we go deeper than the textbooks, beyond the headlines and into the real human cost of World War II. If you're new here, subscribe right now and hit that bell. Every story we tell is history that demands to be remembered. Don't miss a single one. Jozef Tiso was born on October 13, 1887, in Bytča, a quiet market town nestled in the valleys of northwestern Slovakia, then part of the sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. His father was a butcher. His family was deeply Catholic. From childhood, Tiso was quietly exceptional. Sharp, disciplined, gifted in languages, particularly Hungarian and German. He was the kind of student who gets noticed. The local bishop did just that, and sponsored young Tiso to study theology at the prestigious University of Vienna in 1906. By 1910, and he was a fully ordained Catholic priest. By 1911, he had earned a doctorate in theology. Here is what historians find genuinely remarkable. Jozef Tiso, in his early years, was considered a good man. He ran social programs. He fought poverty. He campaigned against alcoholism among Slovak workers. His biographer James Mace Ward at Stanford University describes him as someone drawn to agendas of progress for the country and for the weaker social classes. But even then, buried beneath the good deeds, the rot was already setting in. Tiso blamed Jewish tavern owners for the alcoholism destroying his communities. He joined cooperatives specifically designed to undercut Jewish-owned local businesses. And when he witnessed Polish Galician Jews during his early travels, he privately described them as associated with filth, disorder, and fraud. This wasn't fringe thinking for the era, but in Tiso's hands it would one day become policy. When World War I exploded in the summer of 1914, Tiso became a military chaplain with the 71st Infantry Regiment of the Austro-Hungarian Army, a unit composed almost entirely of Slovak soldiers. He followed them into the mud, the artillery barrages, and the field hospitals. What's rarely mentioned is this. Tiso kept a diary during the war. He wrote that he wanted to bear witness to the events of the war. He documented soldiers dying in his arms. He described war as a morally purifying force, a cleansing fire that would strengthen nationalism and remove class conflict. Let that sink in. A priest, watching men die by the thousands. And what he took away from it was that war was purifying. By the end of 1914, either a serious kidney illness ended his military service, but his worldview had already been reshaped. He had seen the front. He had seen death at industrial scale. And instead of dedicating his life to preventing it, he was now ideologically prepared to enable it. After the war, 4 empires collapsed almost overnight: Russian, German, Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, and Czechoslovakia was born in October 1918. It was a genuine democratic experiment, but it was fragile. 50% Czech, 22% German, 16% Slovak. Everybody wanted power. Nobody fully trusted each other. Tiso joined the Slovak People's Party in December 1918, a far-right clerico-fascist movement founded by Catholic priest Andrej Hlinka. By 1927, Tiso was Czechoslovakia's Minister of Health and Physical Education, and he refused the government-provided ministerial apartment, choosing to stay in a Prague monastery instead. The image was deliberate. He wasn't a politician. He was a priest serving his people. That image was the most dangerous weapon he ever carried. By 1930, he was the party's vice president. When Hlinka died in August 1938, Tiso seized control of the party within days, even delivering the eulogy at Hlinka's funeral, urging national unity while already cutting deals in the shadows. September 29th to 30th, 1938. Britain and France sat down with Hitler and Mussolini in Munich and handed him the Sudetenland, the fortified German-speaking border region of Czechoslovakia, without a single Czech or Slovak in the room. Czechoslovakia's president fled to France. A democracy collapsed. Slovakia was granted autonomy overnight, and the most powerful man in a suddenly leaderless Slovakia was Jozef Tiso. On March 14, 1939, Tiso declared Slovak independence. The very next day, Nazi Germany devoured the remaining Czech provinces. This was not a coincidence. It was a choreographed dismemberment, and Tiso was Hitler's willing partner in executing it. What did Tiso get in return? A presidential title, a state, German military protection. What did Slovakia get? A one-party fascist dictatorship dressed in Catholic robes and a path straight into the Holocaust. Here is a fact that should stop every single viewer cold. The very first mass deportation of Jews to Auschwitz in history, the first, was not German Jews, not Polish Jews. It was 997 young Slovak Jewish women and teenagers, loaded onto trains in March 1942. They were tricked. Slovak authorities told unmarried Jewish women they were being recruited for labor, farm work, factory work. Families were told their daughters would be safe. Some girls packed their best clothes. Some brought books. They were sent directly to Auschwitz. One survivor, Erna Dranger, later described how her survival was 90% luck. Her son recalled, "My mother collapsed after my birth and my aunt had to take care of me." The trauma never left her body. Another survivor, Mrs. Zuzana Vesela, recalled being loaded into a sealed rail wagon. No windows at all, just a few boards torn off on one side for air, with 2 buckets, one for water, one for a toilet. She pressed her eye to a gap in the boards and tried to read the names of the stations as the train rolled east. She never saw her father again after the selection ramp at the final destination. These were not statistics. These were daughters. And Tiso signed the paperwork. Tiso's government didn't just cooperate with the Holocaust. It just cooperated with the Holocaust. It institutionalized it with pride. In April 1940, the first Aryanization law stripped Jews of their businesses and property. In September 1941, the Jewish Code was passed, modeled on Nazi Germany's Nuremberg laws, and the Slovak government boasted it was the strictest anti-Jewish legislation in all of Europe. Jews couldn't shop at certain hours. They were banned from clubs, parks, and public gatherings. Their civil existence was being erased, one decree at a time. In March 1942, the Slovak state signed a formal deportation agreement with Nazi Germany. Between March and October 1942, 57 transports carried approximately 57,000 to 58,000 Slovak Jews to the death camps. Virtually all were killed in Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Sobibor. Of that first wave of deportees, 92% were dead before the year was out. And then comes the detail that defines everything. Slovakia didn't just allow this, Slovakia paid for it. 500 Reichsmarks per Jewish person, labeled as a fee for retraining and accommodation, totaling 10 million Reichsmarks handed directly to Nazi Germany in exchange for murdering Slovak citizens. A government paying to kill its own people. 2 survivors of those 1942 transports, Rudolf Verba and Alfred Wetzler, escaped Auschwitz in April 1944 and produced the first detailed Western report on what the death camp truly was. Their testimony shocked the world. But by then, most Slovak Jews were already dead. In autumn 1942, the Vatican's own representative, the papal nuncio, brought an urgent message directly to the Tiso government. The Germans were not sending Slovak Jews to work camps. They were murdering them. A Catholic priest was now the head of a Catholic state, being told by the Vatican's own envoy that his policies were producing mass murder. Tiso hesitated, then stopped the deportations, not out of moral outrage, but because of political pressure. and because the remaining 24,000 Jews were still economically useful to the war machine. Presidential exceptions were issued, not because Jewish lives mattered, but because Jewish labor did. This is the moment historians call Tiso's cold calculation. He knew. He had always known. And when it became inconvenient to continue, he paused, only to resume when the political winds changed. On October 30th, 1944, in the Slovak city of Banska Bystrica, Jozef Tiso personally stood on a stage and pinned military decorations onto German soldiers. One of those soldiers was Oskar Dirlewanger, a convicted criminal, a sadist, and the commander of a penal unit responsible for some of the most horrific civilian massacres of the entire war in Poland and Belarus. Dirlewanger's unit would go on to kill over 100,000 civilians in the Warsaw Uprising alone. Tiso, a Catholic priest, gave that man a medal. The trial record of the Slovak National Uprising documented that Tiso's orders directly led to the arrest, torture, and murder of 4,316 people and the abduction of 30,000 more to German concentration camps. By the end of the war, more than 70,000 Jews had been deported from Slovakia. More than 60,000 were murdered. Over two-thirds of Slovakia's entire pre-war Jewish population was gone. As Soviet forces closed in on Slovakia in spring 1945, Tiso didn't stand with his nation. He ran. He fled through Austria into Bavaria, Germany, changed his name to Dr. Josef Taborski, and hid inside a Capuchin monastery in Altötting. American soldiers found him there in June 1945. A man of God, hiding behind false papers in a monastery, hoping the world would forget what he had done. The world had not forgotten. The trial of Jozef Tiso opened on December 2, 1946. Prosecutors played footage from the liberated concentration camps, the mass graves, the skeletal survivors, the gas chambers. The prosecutor later wrote that Tiso was indifferent, looking sideways or at the ground. He showed no remorse. He refused to condemn Nazi Germany. His reasoning, chilling in its arrogance, was that expressing regret would look like a confession of guilt. When asked what he would do if history repeated itself, he said he would act exactly the same way. The trial's Chief Justice, Igor Daxner, wrote in his verdict, Tiso never did anything that could cleanse his reputation as an executioner. On April 15, 1947, the Czechoslovak National Court found Jozef Tiso guilty of treason, collaboration with Nazi Germany, approving the Jewish Code, authorizing the deportation of nearly 58,000 Slovak Jews, and crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to death by hanging. He appealed to President Beneš for clemency. No reprieve came. The night before his death, Tiso told those around him that he felt like a martyr of the Slovak nation. Not a single word about the 997 girls on the first train. Not a word about the families torn apart on the selection ramps. Not a word about the 60,000 dead. On the morning of April 18, 1947 in Bratislava, Jozef Tiso walked to the gallows in his full black clerical robes, holding a metal crucifix. And here is the detail that history quietly records. The hanging was botched. The trapdoor fell, but the drop failed to break his neck. Instead of a quick death, Tiso slowly suffocated, suspended from the rope, for several agonizing minutes. He was 59 years old. To prevent his grave from becoming a far-right shrine, the Czechoslovak government buried him in secret. It didn't work. His followers tracked down the grave. Decades later, his remains were exhumed and reburied in the cathedral in Nitra. Today, some in Slovakia still call him a saint, a martyr who sacrificed himself for his nation. The Wilson Center in Washington, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and independent historians who have spent careers studying this man give him a different title: no saint. Over 60,000 murdered people agree. History doesn't always end neatly. The man who paid Nazi Germany to murder his own citizens died in clerical robes, calling himself a martyr. But the real martyrs were the ones who never got a trial, never got a gallows, and never got a grave. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of it, that's history doing its job. Hit like if you believe these stories must never be forgotten. Subscribe to WW2 Time Tales for deep dive histories that go beyond the headlines into the real human cost of the deadliest war in history? And drop your answer in the comments. Should Tiso be remembered as a war criminal, or does history see him differently in Slovakia today? We read every comment. We'll see you in the next one. World War II Time Tales.